I've talked to a number of people who are happy to get out of the house, happy to get their children out of the house, maybe their spouse. No one has said that in particular to me, but I've been a pastor for a long time, so I understand that that could be the case. I want to bring you a good report. I had the privilege yesterday of being in Houston to perform a wedding for one of the students from UTD who'd gone through UTD. His whole career at UTD was spent here also at Trinity Bible Church. So this is Stephen Ellsworth. Stephen and a lot of our UTD students are kind of quiet, and you may or may not know him by name, but Stephen was here for his whole UTD career with a couple of his friends from the cross-country team. You remember that? And they would sit right here. And so when I was there, his time at Trinity Bible Church was very formative to him. That's what I want to pass on to you. And he wasn't the only one that I was with, the only one there. That there were half a dozen students from UTD and Trinity Bible Church, some current students, some past students who have already gone on to pursue further education and career and all that, who were there for that wedding. And they're all faithful, they're all, to a person, faithfully living out their faith in their next steps. That's remarkable. That's a tribute to Ashley and Cesar and their ministry. It's a reminder to all of us how important our students are to us, our college students. They matter, and it's hopefully a word of encouragement to you that your kindness, your grace to these students makes a difference. When you notice them, when you invite them to lunch, remember you can always invite them to lunch. When you do that, you remember their names and you welcome them into this church and into your lives, you're making an investment in the future that's going to scatter from here to other parts of North Dallas, North Texas, around, across the country. And so a word of encouragement to you about that. And there was a mariachi band, and that was really fun. Well, this morning, I would like to invite you to open your Bibles to Mark chapter 7. So we're going to be picking up a study that we have been in intermittently over the last several years. We've gone to the Gospel of Mark several different times over the last several years, but it's been a while. And so we're going to pick up this study, and we're going to be in the Gospel of Mark all the way until the beginning of the summer. So we're going to kind of do a long section of Mark and cover some really important material. And we call this Mark, the Gospel of Mark, on the way with Jesus. Christians in the book of Acts, so the early Christians, are known by three different names. One of them is Christianos, little Christs. That's what people called early Christians. They called them the little Christs. It was an outside term for these people who were following this person named Christ. They also called them Nazarenes because they were from the sect that followed the guy from Nazareth. They were Nazarenes. Is the second label they used. And the third label they used for these early believers was the way, people of the way. Because, as we sang this morning, Jesus himself said, I am the way. And Jesus' people follow him and his way. And so this term, the way, was a reference to early Christians and the early movement of Jesus' followers. And Mark, in the Gospel of Mark, picks up on this term, the way. And he uses this term, the way, throughout the Gospel to show Jesus on the way, on his mission, and his disciples, his followers, on the way with him. So the way, this early term for Christians, is a motif that Mark uses. So that's why we call this Mark on the way with Jesus. And it is the Gospel of Mark. It is the good news of Mark. It's not good news about Mark. It's good news about Jesus from Mark's perspective, from Mark's history, research, and writing. And he is one of the 4 gospel accounts that really form the core of our faith. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, 4 different accounts that describe Jesus, his coming, his life, his teachings, his way of life, his death, and his resurrection. And these documents, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, they don't form I was going to say they form the core of our faith, but they don't form the core of our faith. They describe the history that forms the core of our faith. They describe the historic events that are the basis of the way. They describe and document Jesus, his life, his teachings, his death, resurrection, so that we understand what happened in real history and the implications that come from that. So we have these 4 documents that describe the historic events that form the foundation of everything that we believe as Christians, Christ followers. But as evangelicals, we have a kind of funny relationship with the Gospels. For documents, writings that are so central to our faith, we ironically treat them in a funny way. We value them as historic documents. We value the Gospels because they tell us who Jesus is and what he said, and they're verifiably reliable, and they give us important information that helps us understand how God worked in the world to save us. But once we've been saved, we move on from the Gospels. Once we have understood and accepted the historicity of who Jesus is and what he said and why he came and he died and rose again, we gravitate to Paul and his epistles and spend much of the rest of our faith in the epistles. It's like we trust Jesus for salvation, but then we like to go on to Paul to explain everything. We like Paul because he's clear, he's logical, he explains things. And when you're finished reading Paul in the epistles, you know what you're supposed to go and do about it. But Jesus is mysterious, he's oblique, he's indirect, he tells stories, and sometimes you think he's telling that story just to make you have to think about it for a while. And we'd rather have Paul skip the story and just tell us what to do. And so we trust Jesus for salvation, but we go to Paul to explain the rest of what it means to be a Jesus follower. That is not giving the Gospels their adequate place in our lives as Jesus followers. We do value the 4 Gospels for their historicity. That is super important to us because they do contain reliable, historic documentation of Jesus. But they're not just historic documents. Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, they're not just written to record the history of Jesus. They are transformational documents. They are also these Gospels are meant to transform us, not just from unbelievers to believers, but from believers, disciples, into mature, well-informed disciples who relate to Jesus in both relationship, imitation, and mission. The Gospels are meant to inform us about our relationship, how to have relationship with Jesus, how to be with him. The Gospels are how we do that. The Gospels are how we be with Jesus. The Gospels inform our imitation. They show us the pattern that we're supposed to live, how to be like Jesus. We find that in the Gospels, how to be like Jesus. The Gospels inform us about our mission, the purpose of our following Jesus, how to carry out the works that Jesus wants to do in the world. The Gospels show us this. So the Gospels don't just contain historic information that once we understand and accept, we move on to other things. The Gospels contain transformational pictures of what it means to have relationship with Jesus, how to imitate him, how to carry out his mission, so that when we read about the disciples, see, we don't just learn about Jesus in the Gospels, we also learn about the disciples. And when we look at the disciples, we are meant to see ourselves in developing relationship with Jesus. And that's especially clear in the gospel, the good news of Mark. We've said in past studies in Mark that Mark is written in part as a handbook on discipleship. That's one of Mark's purposes, is to give us a handbook on discipleship. Mark is about two things. It is about who Jesus is and how we should respond. And this whole how we should respond is the discipleship piece to who Jesus is. And this morning in Mark chapter 7, we are in this section. A section, really the first third of Mark is devoted to helping disciples come to grips with who Jesus is. That's the first part of the first third of Mark. And we still, for 4 more Sundays, we're going to still be in this section that explores who Jesus is. Who is this person? If you were to sit down this afternoon and open the Gospel of Mark and just start reading from the beginning, you would see, it's so obvious, people are trying to figure out who this guy is. Now, the next thing they're going to have to come to grips with is not who Jesus is, but they're going to have to come to grips with his mission. That's where we'll be in about a month. Coming to grips not with who Jesus is, but what his mission is, which has implications for us. But right now, we're still just trying to figure out who Jesus is and how to respond to that. Who is this person who heals people, who casts out demons, who takes on the Pharisees, the religious establishment, who teaches with such passion and authority and knowledge that they're like, people who hear him are like, who is this person? Coming to grips with who Jesus is. That's the section that we're in, the first third of Mark. And that's where the disciples find themselves this morning. They find themselves in the middle of this question, who is Jesus? Now, you would think that by end of Mark chapter 7, the disciples would understand who Jesus is and how they were supposed to respond to him. But they don't. They have had little glimpses and some success, but they've also had significant failures, and there are more failures ahead for these disciples. They are still in the process, fits and starts, of coming to grips with who Jesus is, which honestly is good news for you and me, really. Because if you're like, sometimes I don't know what to think about Jesus, sometimes I have a lot of confidence, and sometimes I have a lot of questions. Well, I mean, the good news is that's part of being a disciple and moving forward in that so that there's more, over time, more confidence and less questions. But the disciples, they're still in the middle of this. And it's kind of painful and slow to watch, as we'll see in the weeks ahead. But today, they're going to encounter a model disciple. Today, they are going to see a model disciple. And this person, the least likely person you would expect to model, to be a model disciple. And this person is going to demonstrate demonstrate the essential quality for having relationship with Jesus. The essential quality for being able to imitate Jesus, relationship, imitation, mission. The essential quality for being able to be on mission with Jesus. The essential quality. See if you can discern this quality as we read this passage from this unlikely model of discipleship in Mark chapter 7, I'm on page 865 of the Pew Bible in front of you if you want to read from that translation, 865. That's Mark chapter 7, and we're going to begin reading. You'll appreciate having a Bible in front of you this morning. So as we read, beginning in verse 24, Jesus left that place and went on to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it. Yet he could not keep his presence a secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. I've read this passage a lot, and I'm sorry to get stuck right here. Not sorry, but it's not something I've experienced in working through this passage all the times that I have. A woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, born in Syrian Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. First, let the children eat all they want, he told her. But it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Lord, she replied, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. And then he told her, for such a reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter. She went home and found her child lying on the bed and the demon gone. Why is this story in the Gospels? Why did Mark choose to record this incident about this woman who came to Jesus? We've seen Jesus cast out demons before. We've seen Jesus heal people before. What is this passage doing in our Bibles? Mark is written to help us see Jesus for who he is and how to respond to him. What does this passage teach us about who Jesus is and how we should respond? I read a book over the holidays that really helped me think about this passage when I came to it to share it with you. So Lisa and I, every now and then, we get to go out on a date. And when we do, the first place we go is half-price books. That's the first place we go. We're not even thinking about eating. We're just going to go to half-price books. And we go to half-price books, and Lisa goes one way, and I go the other. That's how our date begins. I'm going to go there. You'll go there. We'll see you in about 45 minutes, maybe an hour. And then we're ready to talk to each other. We first need kind of that decompressed time. And so it was a couple years ago, several years ago, 2.5 years ago just about, that we went, and I saw a book sitting on the bookshelf, and it was by a guy who'd helped me think well about the Sermon on the Mount when we went through that several years back. His name is Jonathan Pennington. And I saw that he had another book. I just saw a book. I wasn't looking for anything by him, but you know how half-price book is. You go in there ready to impulse buy. And so there was this book by this professor and a pastor that I'd grown to appreciate through some of his other things. And I pulled that book off the shelf. It's called Reading the Gospels Wisely. And I thought that sounds really helpful. I'd like to read that. And I kind of worked through the first couple chapters of it back in when I bought it. And then it sat on my shelf for a while, and during the holidays I thought this is a great time to pick up this book and review it and then finish the rest of it. I'm glad I did, because one of the things that he talks about in his book, and it's for people who really are motivated to read it. So if that's you, that's great. If you're not, if you're like, I'm going to get that book, and you're not really motivated to read it, I wouldn't invest in it. It's good, but you got to kind of study your way through it. But one of the things that he says that I feel like is really a beautiful thing is he talks about understanding stories in the gospel, that one of the ways that we can extract the meaning of a passage, and we can understand why is that passage in this gospel, is by applying what he calls a heat map to the passage. The idea is this: you look at you know what a heat map is? It's a way of examining topography, a piece of land, and picking up where the hot spots are, or other. I'm sure they use this kind of technology in other places as well, but for most of us, we can think of a map. And you think of where the hot spots are and where the cold spots are. And the warm spots are orange, and the hot spots are bright red, and the cold spots are some kind of shade of chilly blue. And if we looked at a heat map of the United States today, it would all be just like blue. No real, probably some warmer spots, but that's what a heat map does. A heat map looks at a territory and helps you understand the cool parts and the hot parts. And Pennington explains that when you read a story in the Gospels, not all the parts of the story are equally hot. There are some parts of the story that are cooler, and some parts that are hotter. And when you get to the hottest part of the passage, that's where the real point of the passage can be found. So I want you to think about that. And I want to read through this passage again. And I want you to think about the hot spots and the cold spots. I think what I'll do is let me have you practice. I'm just going to have you practice, and then we're going to go back through it. Put your hands out here in front of you, and you're going to be a thermometer. And I just want to read through the passage without saying anything, and then we'll go back through it. But I want you to kind of rate the heat of this passage. So I got to see your hands. You got to participate. This is all right. And so here, start out warm. This is neutral, and this is cool. Well, maybe start down here. Cool. We'll see. Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it. Is that warm? A little warmer? He could not keep his presence a secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, born in Syrian Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. Okay? First, let the children eat all they want, he told her. For it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Lord, she replied, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Then he told her, for such a reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter. She went home and found her child lying on the bed and the demon gone. All right, thank you. Let me tell you how I see this story. Rating on the topographical heat map, the gospel heat map. You would initially think that the very beginning of the story might be cool because it's just kind of background information. But in this case, I think the background information is really important here. It's still relative to the rest of the passage. It's a cooler part of the passage, but still, there's some important information here because Jesus went to the vicinity of Tyre. Tyre is over here on the west coast of Palestine. It's on the west coast. It's on the Mediterranean. And Tyre is outside of the strongholds or the traditionally Jewish locations of Jerusalem and Judea. It's over here. And so Jesus has already entered Gentile territory, so whatever might happen while Jesus is outside of these Jewish areas, whatever might happen to him here, it could contain some interesting developments. And we see a little bit of insight into what Jesus needs here. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know about it. He needs a little bit of rest and recuperation. The crowds in the Gospel of Mark are not a sign of, they're kind of negative when there are big crowds. So Jesus is off with his disciples in a house, and he didn't want anyone to know about it, yet he couldn't keep his presence a secret. So even those basic facts are kind of warm. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. Okay, heats up a little bit, doesn't it? Because now Jesus is not going to get the R&R that he planned on. He's not going to get this anonymity that he had hoped for. And as a matter of fact, there may be some spiritual warfare. Talk about not getting the R&R that you might need. So a little bit warmer. And then verse 26 says the woman was a Greek. And all of a sudden the heat jumps up to here. This isn't just a woman, this is a Greek born in Syrian Phoenicia. She is a Gentile. She has no entitled claim to Jesus, the Messiah. She's outside of God's covenant people. But she comes anyway, and she begs Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. First, let the children eat all they want, Jesus tells her. Now, that goes from a Greek woman comes to Jesus and probably actually enters the house. I mean, if Jesus, it specifically says Jesus is in the house, did she go in the house? Did she stand outside the house and yell for Jesus? Either way, she's got to be pretty aggressive. And Jesus responds to her vulnerability in a way that doesn't seem very nice. She puts herself out there, and Jesus says, first let the children, meaning the Jewish people, the people who are part of God's covenant. First let the children eat all they want. It's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. I wonder if he's even saying, I don't know, I was just thinking about this morning, if he's even saying here, hey, I am a limited quantity right here. I'm human. I have humanity to me. He's human and divine. But I can only be so many places and do so many. I don't know. But he responds in a way that wouldn't surprise a Jewish person, but to us sounds, wow, why? Why didn't you just show her grace? And you wonder, Jesus knows people. He's testing her faith. Maybe not testing her faith, but giving her an opportunity to really assert her faith in him. So he challenges her, pushes back a little bit. Lord, first word out of her mouth. Lord, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Whew. So hot, you can't touch it. because she comes to Jesus for help. He kind of pushes her back a little bit, and she comes back to him. That is so hot you can't touch it. That's so hot, her faith in Jesus, her total dependence, so hot you can't touch it. And Jesus says in verse 29, for such a reply, because of what you just said, because you pushed back on me, you may go, the demon has left your daughter. That topographical map, that heat map, shows us what Mark is wanting to get across to us about who Jesus is and that essential ingredient in having a relationship with him. First, we see who Jesus is. We see more of who Jesus is here. We get a little bit of glimpse of his humanity, that he does get tired. He does need space. He does want time, perhaps, to just spend with his disciples. But more than that, we see his deity. We see his supernatural power, that Jesus has power over supernatural forces. He has power over the forces of evil in the world, and he casts this demon out of this little girl. He doesn't even show up at her house. He does it from a distance. He doesn't lay hands on her, no holy water. No magic incantation. He just says, I'll take care of that. And he does. And we are meant to see Jesus in this supernatural ability, his divine power. So we see a little bit of his humanity. We certainly see his divinity, his power over all spiritual forces. And we see his compassion. Just as we read this morning, the Lord is compassionate and gracious. We see his compassion for this woman, his compassion for her daughter. And Jesus makes it very clear that she is outside of any obligation that he may have. What he does for her is out of his grace and compassion. Now, that's the same Jesus that we follow. That's my point about the Gospels playing a meaningful role in our lives today. This is the same Jesus we follow, who has all the power and all the goodness. Compassion. And the hottest spot in this passage, so we see who Jesus is, but the hottest part of this passage is not just who Jesus is, but what it is that he responds to. The hottest part of the passage is this woman coming back to Jesus, not only coming into the first place, but then coming back and saying, even the dogs get the leftovers. And she demonstrates this one essential ingredient that we have to have as disciples. She demonstrates faith. Faith. Humble, bold, persistent faith. Humble, bold, persistent faith. Her faith is humble. She knows she's not entitled to anything from Jesus. She knows that. She just wants his leftovers. From you, leftovers would be enough for me. That's the kind of faith that she has. Humble. Bold. She comes to Jesus, maybe enters his house. This passage, verse 27, when it says, in fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman came and fell at his feet. You may know that one of Mark's favorite words is the word immediately. 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 Well, here it is used of this woman immediately. As soon as she hears about Jesus, she runs to him and falls at his feet. She is bold in her faith, and she is persistent. She goes against social norms. She risks vulnerability and criticism and falls at Jesus' feet. It makes me think, this kind of bold, persistent, humble faith, it makes me think of the passage that we studied several months ago in Luke chapter 11. We were talking about prayer. Remember the parable of the friend at midnight who comes to his neighbor and knocks on the door and says, I need some bread. I know it's midnight. I know when you wake up, you're going to wake up all your kids. But yeah, I need some bread right now. And we learn from that passage that it's right for us to bother the Father. Well, here, this woman, she doesn't bother the Father, she bothers the Son. He's VRBOing over here on the Mediterranean, and she comes and knocks on the door and says, I need you to help me. I need your help right now. And she comes to him and she bothers the Son. And he responds. She demonstrates that shameless audacity that we talked about in Luke 11. That's what she brings to this situation. Shameless audacity. And tells Jesus what she needs. Such a great picture of that essential ingredient that each of us have to bring to our relationship with Jesus. We have to bring bold, humble, persistent faith. That is the currency. It's the currency of having a relationship with Jesus. Then, notice how faith gets the very last word. This bold faith, it's not over yet. Look, verse 29. Then he told her, for such a reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter. Now, the woman is here. Jesus is here. Her daughter is somewhere else. And Jesus says, okay, I fixed it. I took care of it. It will be fixed when you get home. She doesn't have her daughter with her. She has no proof that this has happened. She just has Jesus' word saying, go on and go home. It will be fixed when you get there. As a matter of fact, it's already fixed. You just don't know it yet, and you haven't experienced it yet. But you get home, and it will be fixed when you get there. Faith to the very end. She had to leave Jesus, the one she had begged for help, and take his word for the fact that it would be fixed when she got there. If there is one reality that I'm hanging on to in my relationship with Jesus over these past several years, it is those words. It will be fixed when you get there. There are certain things in life that will not be fixed, cannot be fixed right now, but will be fixed when we get there. And we just have to take Jesus at his word. That's what it comes down to, just taking Jesus at his word. It will be fixed when you get there. We live in a world where Satan wants to devour and destroy us. The world wants to grind us up with its malfunctioning. Death is on the march, one day closer every day. Not just for us, but for our sons and for our daughters. And we have to demonstrate this currency of bold, humble, persistent faith that it will be fixed when we get there. You may have certain elements in your life that you just have to take Jesus' word. It'll be fixed when you get there. And you don't even know how it will be fixed. All you know is Jesus has all the power and he has all the goodness. And someday it will all be very clear. In the meanwhile, we have to be faithful disciples like this woman who leaves Jesus in good faith, trusting him at his word. So, you and I have problems. I don't know how they will be solved. I don't know if God will solve them on this end of things or on the other end of things. but I know that they will be fixed when we get there. What we have to bring, the currency that we have to bring, is bold, persistent, humble faith. We can't have relationship with Jesus unless we demonstrate faith. Just being able to have relationship with Jesus takes faith from us. We can't imitate Jesus and his way of life without bold, persistent, humble faith. You can't put Jesus' teachings into practice without faith. Jesus said, love your enemies. Jesus said, pray for those who persecute you. You can't imitate that way of life. You can't imitate that way of life without faith. Jesus said, blessed are those who are merciful, for they will obtain mercy. Hey, you can't practice that in this world without faith that it will be okay when we get there, because you're going to worry about maybe getting the short hand of the stick. If you're merciful, if you forgive, if you practice the Jesus way, well, then what's going to happen? It'll be fixed when you get there. Relationship with Jesus requires this faith. Imitation of Jesus requires this faith. Being on mission with Jesus requires the same kind of faith. We can't have relationship, imitation, or mission with Jesus unless we bring this kind of faith to our relationship. It's the currency in which we have a relationship with Jesus. That's what we learn from this passage. Many of us are Jesus followers already, and we just need this reminder that Jesus is the one that God sent, that he is the one with all the goodness and all the power, and it will be fixed when we get there. And we just need to be able to trust him. We need to be able to ask him. So ask him. You have something that you want to make sure is fixed when you get there? Bother the Son and the Father. Bother them both through the Spirit. Do that. There are certain things God wants to do and would do if we asked him to, so ask him. So those of us who are followers, good lesson for us from this model disciple. For those who are still deciding what you think about who Jesus is, look at who he is in this passage. Compassionate, gracious, powerful, full of goodness. He might test our faith sometimes because he wants to draw it out of us, but he responds not on the basis of our ethnicity, not on the basis of our pedigree, not on the basis of our theological precision, but on the basis of our faith in him. All it takes from you is turning to Jesus with that same kind of faith. And you will be given restored relationship with God, and you will have relationship, a person to do life with, Jesus, a purpose, a mission, a pattern to follow, Jesus' way of life. So I'd encourage you to consider what that life decision might mean for you. And if we can walk you through that here at Trinity Bible Church, we would love to do that. This encounter with Jesus, the living Jesus, through the Gospels for his disciples. Let's pray. Father, thank you for being our Father in heaven. And we're thankful we can bother you about the things that are bothering us. We thank you for Jesus, so we can bring to him the challenges of life. And we can see in him how you work in our lives. We can see in him all the power and all the goodness. And I pray that you will give us what we need to trust you. Give us what we need to believe that it will be fixed when we get there. Thank you for this woman. What a great faith she demonstrates for us. Help us to be people of faith in our relationship with Jesus. People of faith in our imitation, following his pattern of living. People of faith when it comes to the mission that you've called us to, of making disciples and bringing Jesus to the world. We believe, help our unbelief. We ask in your Son's name. Amen. Let me invite you to stand for the benediction. I'm thankful that we've had the opportunity to encounter Jesus and see him for who he is today. Pick up the Gospel of Mark sometime this week. If you want to read through it, look for how Mark explores the idea of who is this guy. Now may the God of peace, who through the blood of the eternal covenant brought back from the dead our Lord Jesus, that great shepherd of the sheep, may he equip you with everything good for doing his will and work in us what is pleasing to him. Through Jesus Christ, to whom be glory forever and ever. Amen.